Evening. Welcome to Athens City Council. It's 7:01 p.m. Monday. Tonight we are in committees. We have no special session scheduled. According to our agenda, we will be meeting as a committee of the whole, which means that all members of council will sit at the dais and discuss the topic. After that is the Transportation Committee, and then that'll be followed up by Finance and Personnel Committee. We have a quorum. I think all members except one are present. There's no voting tonight, so that won't matter too much. So let's get started with our Committee of the Whole, Solid Waste, Fee Adjustments. I'll start with the Administration, the Service Safety Director, Director Stone.
I'll defer to Councilmember Swank, who I worked with on this.
Okay. Councilmember Swank.
Yes, sir. This is fairly straightforward. If you remember back in late January, early February, we talked about basing the fees for the collection of residential trash on the trash put out as opposed to one's classification of residency, i.e. a homeowner versus a renter. I met with Mr. Stone and also Mr. Riggs, and we worked out a plan that will do just that, and most importantly, not affect the city's budget in a negative way. Those were the two goals. One, to allow a renter to have the same rate as a homeowner, but also not to affect the city's budget in a negative way. Currently, if a homeowner puts out 1 can of trash, they pay $15.23 a month. This would raise the rate to $15.43 a month, a net increase of 20 cents, which over the course of the year would be $2.40 for that 1 can of trash. The 2 can rate would go from $22.05 to $22.25, again, a 20-cent per month raise, or $2.40 over the course of the year. For those who rent, they would have the opportunity to opt in to the 1 can rate if that's what they put out. And their rate would be the same, $15.43 per month for 1 can, or if they were putting out to $22.25. The rates for 4 to 6 occupants, 7 to 9, and 10 or more have also been adjusted by 20 cents per month. So the most any one individual would see of an increase over the course of a year would be $2.40. To make sure that this is revenue neutral so that we don't lose money and put any more burden on our trash and garbage fund, if a significant number of people decide to switch from the 2 can rate to the 1 can rate, for every 100 customers who do that, the rates will go up 20 cents. So that may sound like a lot, but let's put it this way. If 1,000 residents did that, which we know is not going to happen, the rate would go up $2. Just $2. This would do 2 things. It would bring equity to the charges so that renters and homeowners would pay the same amount if they opted into the 1 can rate. And secondly, it would not have a negative impact on the city's budget. I met with Mr. Stone, Mr. Riggs, and Andrew Chickey. They ran the numbers on this, and we came to this conclusion to achieve those 2 desirable goals. Mr. Stone, does that pretty well sum things up? Anything you'd like to add, please?
It does. It does. I don't know that I could have said that any more succinctly. The important thing to note is with that scale, the initial 20-cent increase occurs initially, and then as every 100 people opt in, basically that would then go and cause it to slide. And we will probably come back. In fact, I know we will come back to this body after we rebid our solid waste services next year and make recommendations on rates across the board. So really, this is about a 1 year ordinance that will govern the way trash rates would be handled really for the next year, and this will hopefully avoid having to come back and have any more discussion about it over that time frame.
And one thing this may also do is give us an idea of where people line up in terms of the trash they put out as we begin to shape the bid specifications for our next contract in 2023.
Member Crowell,
Thank you, Member.
Pro Tem.
And thank you, Mr. Swank and City Administration for working on making this more equitable. I'll just throw out something that came up to me, which is that I have 3 permanent residents in my home, and wasn't so long ago that we had 4, and we still only produced 1 bag of trash. So there's no flexibility here for a renter in the 4 to 6 occupant category to move to the 1 container rate. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So it doesn't solve all our equity problems. I mean, it doesn't, if we're really trying to get through to this pay-as-you-throw, right? And so if we have a nice house of college student renters who are very sustainability-minded and are composting and are recycling, and they have 4 people in the house, they are required to spend $25.40 for their the 1 can that they put out. Now, I understand this is just a year, and we're trying to get this as perfect as possible, and I feel like this is progress. But maybe as we work on this in the next year, and as we see what the new waste and recycling and composting hauling service contract will be. And if our goal is to make this equitable for all citizens of Athens, it seems to me we're not quite there yet.
And I would agree with what you're saying. One simple solution, if we had the technology, which some cities do, when the truck pulls up, there is a geopositional scanner, and I don't know if scanner is the correct word, but a geopositional device that, boom, there's a little barcode on that container, and boom, that's what you're billed. It's all automated. You understand?
I understand what you're saying. It's up to the service provider, not to the city.
Exactly.
We can't determine
No,
what they're going to use.
and to try to get that implemented for the last year of this contract, I think would be very, very difficult to do. I think this is a good first step. It shows as a council that we are sensitive to the equity that we talk about on a daily basis, and that we are trying 1 step at a time to make the system do 2 things. 1, be as equitable as possible, and secondly, and I know you appreciate this, to encourage people to generate less trash every day.
Director Stone.
There are a couple points that I would make in response to that. Certainly we could monitor, and if there was a request from a household greater than 4 unrelated occupants that was a permanent rental, we could come back to this body and make a recommendation for change on down the road. There are 550 accounts as of February that are in the 4 occupant rental or greater, and that's 4 to 6 occupants, 7 to 9 occupants, or 10 or more occupants. The lion's share of those, as you get into larger, are rooming houses, and we've never had a request from an organization like that or to make a request for the lower can rate. This mechanism of billing has been in place since 2002, the end of 2002, and so this is the first step to draw a distinction between or to rather go back to an opportunity for both renters and owner-occupied users since 2002 to be able to opt for that same 1 can rate, at least insofar as the 1 through 3 occupants category is concerned. It's important to note that about 80 cents of the cost is due to the amount of trash. So if you take a 40-cent or I'm sorry, a 40-pound trash can. And some trash cans, 32-gallon trash cans might weigh more than that, some may weigh less than that. And you look at what current tipping fees are, they're about 80 cents. Now, if you take the amount of space that uses on a truck versus everything else that's on the truck once it's been compacted with the packer truck, let's say $1. So when we look at the difference between the two-can rate right now, or the proposed two-can rate of $22.25 versus $15.43, that's nearly $7 in subsidy, or $6 really in subsidy, that the remainder of the ratepayers, the two-can rate and above, are paying for the personnel or the residents who've chosen to opt into the one-can rate opt into. So we're tremendously incentivizing the one-can rate, and the remainder of the ratepayers are carrying that cost in order to incentivize them. So to the tune of about a 700% greater amount, if you're saying that it's about $1 for a single can of trash when it comes to the tipping fee. So really, what you're paying for is the service, someone to come to your house, and then we greatly incentivize the one-can rate for people that put out one can of trash, because we believe that that's an important thing to do. This has the opportunity now for rentals of 1 to 3 renters to also opt into that, and this sliding scale based on the number of people that opt into this system from today forward will allow it to make it a revenue neutral opportunity as we go through the rest of the term of the contract. If we do get a request from a rental, and remember, Crowell, if you know a rental that has 4 to 6 occupants or 7 to 9 occupants or 10 or more that believes that they can get by with putting out 1 can of trash, certainly we'll listen to that, and then if we get that request, we'll come back to this body and make a recommendation for another change.
Thank you.
Other members of council? Member Crowell.
One additional question. That rate increase for every 100 new customers to the single container rate, will that be announced on our utility bills? There will be no council action there. It's already set by this ordinance, so that will just be a sort of a city announcement. We hit that number, things are going up 20 cents.
Correct. We'll do an analysis monthly based on the number of people who will opt in or opt for the single can rate. And if we run into a situation where we have a month that occurs, we'll do an announcement on the utility bill and say that this. Honestly, I believe that we'll probably have potentially 100 to 200 people or accounts opt for this. I don't think it's going to happen to the extent that it's going to cause much of a change between now and the end of the trash contract. But if it does, certainly we'll make that announcement on the utility bill announcements for the following month.
Other elected officials? No. Okay. Members of the audience? I think you know the drill. We'll give you 3 minutes. Write your name and address, and do you represent a group? And
Rob Delac, live at 124 Morris Avenue, here in the city. And I just wrote my full last name, which you've probably never seen before. So I don't represent anyone, just myself. Question for clarification. Something came up last time that mentioned that a lot of the rental accounts are held by the landlords and not by the renters themselves. I'm wondering how that plays into this, or is that the case? Maybe I misheard that before. But it sounded like, are we talking about individual accounts here, 1 to 3 people, that's held by one of the renters in their name? Or could it be held in the landlord's name? What's the scenarios for that? Does anyone know?
Great. Okay. Member Grace.
Let me finish my thought on it.
Okay.
Maybe is that I'm a little concerned if it is not just individual accounts and it's the landlord that could opt all of their tenants in to a 1 can rate that with a sweep of a hand, we could have 100 accounts right there. But I'm not sure.
So all city utility accounts are required to be held in the property owner's name. So the rental properties that I own, all of the accounts are in my name. Based on the agreement that I have with the tenants, I can ask the city utilities office to send a bill to the residents, but it is just addressed to occupant or resident at that address. And ultimately, the account is still in my name. But as to whether a landlord would go in and just change all accounts quickly, because of the additional charges that will be added to the accounts for untagged bags, any landlord who is aware of the amount of trash generated by their tenants would be unlikely to do that unless it was an appropriate choice, just because it adds significantly to the bill to have excess over the can limit. Just because of the number of, there's still the breakdown based on number of occupants. For instance, I have one account that has up to 8 occupants on that one city account, and so it's going to stay in that 7 to 9 occupant category. And so because it would only be, you could only do it for a 1 to 3 occupant residence, I don't think there would be a massive switch. But that's just my guess, and then I do know that the utility bills are required to stay in the property owner's name. Does that answer?
Yeah, I think so. So it doesn't sound like it's probably going to be a problem, but it still could be an issue. We'll see. I guess we have to see what happens. But I'm just a little concerned that might happen, that landlords might just go, if they're paying it directly and not really charging their tenants directly, it's just part of the rent, they might try and save costs by just, changing 100 accounts over to a lower rate if they have the small enough units. We might see a big change if that happens. What happened with the composting? Didn't a bunch of landlords just opt out of that automatically? So, yeah, it could happen. I guess we need to keep an eye on it. Thank you.
Auditor Heck.
I'm allowed to talk now. I didn't take my opportunity. And maybe Andy wants to explain this, and this is something I missed the first time I read through this, but if you have the draft ordinance in front of you that's highlighted, there is going to be, from my understanding, a review where it says from May through April, the container/week, there'll be a review because the number of tenants also often changes from one school year to the next. So Andy, maybe you can elaborate on that. And that would be a way to monitor that if a rental only has 1 or 2 people and then increases it and they start putting out more and, the tenants actually change, whatever.
Thank you, Auditor Heck. Most leases in Athens are tied to the Ohio University school year. I mean, that's just the way that things operate. So they are a May through April lease, with move-out in many cases happening really at the end of April or that first week in May. And so understanding that residents often change in rentals during that window, there's a provision for if someone has opted for the 1 can rate, and they desire, and they live in a rental and they rent, and they desire to maintain that and they intend to stay in their location, they'll need to request that gets extended into the following year. And really we think that is just a protection, given the fact that so often, particularly if it's a student who's getting ready to move on and they leave their apartment, there's no reason for them to notify the city and say, hey, I want to keep this for the next person that's coming after me. And maybe we don't even know necessarily if the next person that's coming after them would indeed want to keep it at the 1 can rate. So as people opt for this, we'll make sure that they know that if you're going to, and really what we're talking about here are folks who are, families who rent, who may be in a residence for an extended period of time, and just don't intend to stay there just a year and then move on, that come the end of April, they'll need to continue to opt for that 1 can rate in the future year. Hopefully that answered the question.
Member Spielness.
Okay, so perhaps I should know the answer to this, but what happens if somebody opts for a 1 can rate, but they overflow and they have bags hanging out? What happens to people? What are the consequences of that, and what happens?
So if you go to page 2 of this ordinance, there's a provision, and this is existing right now. It doesn't change with this proposed change that Member Swank is proposing. There is an extra bag charge, if you note there. So it's $5.25 for each extra bag above and beyond the amount of cans that you currently have assigned to your account, or the category that you're in. So if you go beyond the can that is assigned to your account, you put out extra bags, you'd pay $5.25 for each additional bag. Special hauls, and this is for the things that are above and beyond bags, maybe weird shaped things like couches and bicycles and sliding boards and mattresses and, you know,
That's weird.
you name it, is based on a cubic yardage rate, which we have a list where we have estimated cubic yards for a twin mattress versus a double mattress versus any variety of other things, are billed at $15.75. And so that's for the things that are outside of your garbage can that you put up along the curb. Hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you.
Madam President?
Looking at the proposed ordinances, it does refer to a 32-gallon container, and so I was wondering if there's a long-term plan to move everybody to the consistent 32-gallon container, because I don't think very many people in town have that.
We talked about that as one of the 4 or 5 things that we'll take up after the July recess as we begin to shape the bid specs. Standardized cans come in a variety of sizes. Obviously, Mr. DeLocke mentioned composting. Composting will be part of that conversation. And you know, how we can possibly, as some cities have done, not modernize, but what's the word I'm looking for? Using technology to make the accounting process smoother and more accurate. So yes, I've visited with the 2 big box stores in town, Lowe's and Menards, and there's when you get past a certain size, they have improved the wheels on those. So there's a 35-gallon heavy-duty can that might become our new 1 can rate. The next one is at 64. Because used to on those 30 and 32-gallon containers, those wheels were just those little hard ones, and after about 2 or 3 weeks, they were all busted off, and people didn't like to use them. So yes, I think, of course, I don't want to speak out of turn, but that's the City Safety Services Committee that will be discussing that with the administration on what would be best going forward, and we'll take that up in the fall.
Thank you.
Any other members of council wish to speak? Member Crowe?
Thank you.
Any members speak?
No?
Audience speak?
Hold on, just a second.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Yeah, I recognize Mr. Crowe, then I'll get to you.
You know, I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but this just occurred to me. While most leases are May to April, some students don't come until August, right? So will any landlords be looking to get that 1 container rate just for the summer months until there is somebody there actually producing waste in August?
Is that a
Certainly our
rhetorical
system will
question?
allow us to accommodate that if someone made that request.
Okay, thank you.
Let me get Mr. Sir, your turn.
Thank you. My name is Tony Ferrian. I live out on Lavelle Road. I represent Bobcat Rentals here in Athens, Ohio. We have about 70 units right around in this community. Alan, I want to congratulate you. You're a leader. That's what leaders do. They stand up, they see a problem, and they solve it. Andy, thank you very much. You saw a problem, you stood up, and you took care of it. That's what real leaders do. That's why I'm proud to be an Athenian. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Member Grace, you had something to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to verify that, that an individual, whether a renter or a homeowner, it says it's for a May through April term for the rentals. But suppose, even if a lease starts in May, the tenants move in May, but they're not really aware of the option to switch, or and are tenants able to switch without, even if the account is in the landlord's name? Can they just come in and say, I live here and I want to switch at any point in time during the year? Or does it have to happen according to the May to April term?
I would say that's an administrative decision in terms of processing. As Mr. Stone, I believe, accurately said, I don't see this as the California gold rush of 1849. If anything, this may be a trickle. And I think with the personnel we have in place downstairs, that reasonable requests delivered in the appropriate fashion could be accommodated during regular business hours throughout the course of the year.
So it's not intended to be a set term for the year?
I do not believe so, but I don't supervise the folks downstairs, so I will defer to Mr. Stone on that.
Provision insert here is for the reset, to go back to the full rate.
Okay.
It's not to say that you're stuck. So if someone were to opt during the month of November and say, hey, I'm not generating enough trash, so warrant the 2-can rate, then by all means they could opt. And that's just what we do with owner-occupied folks now as well. They opt into it. It's just that that reset really needs to be inserted to protect the city, so that you don't have accounts that are in that status forever. To the second question about really I think it would depend upon the circumstances surrounding the whether it's utility owner or utility customer, or if it goes to ultimately to the property owner that doesn't reside at that address, on who needs to make the request. So if it goes to a utility customer at such address and that person then comes and makes the request, certainly we could do that and make the change. And then if they were to accumulate trash or put out more trash, then it would go into the special haul category.
Thank you.
Any other comments from anyone? Member Ziff.
I'm still down here. I just had one question, just to
You were
make sure I'm understanding everything right. So because I'm a renter, and I've lived in the same house for almost 6 years, so it would just be every April come in, say opting for the 1-can rate if I wanted to, and then that would just clear me up. The next year come back, do the same thing, pretty much.
Correct, and we're fortunate enough that we have a relatively small community. I mean, right now there's as of today, there's 2,452 accounts that are on the 2-can rate. That's both owner occupied and renters, and 882 accounts that are on the 1-can rate. And it's not that many, particularly, we've got some pretty seasoned staff in utilities billing that know people, and that know the community. And so if they know that, Andy Stone lives at 123 Elm Street, which is not a real address in Athens, and is a long-term renter, they may say, hey, do you intend to stay on the same 1-can rate? I'd like to think, we probably can't catch everybody that way, but, I like to think that in a small community, you can extend that a little bit extra level of personal service to folks when you know the circumstances like yours exist.
Thank you. Yeah, and I didn't mean to imply like, oh, what a hassle for me to come down to the place where I already come all the time. But yeah, that is really good to know. And yeah, just to further say what you said, they do a great job down there. They're really, really nice people. Have a good conversation.
Anyone else? Okay, then, I think we can call the Committee of the Whole committee closed. And we'll move on to the Transportation Committee. Those members of myself, Sarah Grace, Ben Ziff, and Alan Swank, all council members in good standing, will remain at the dais. Everyone else must leave.
In good standing.
In good standing.
Good standing.
Yeah.
You did pay your dues, okay.
Indeed.
Pay your tithe.
Let's see, we have just one item here. Let's see if I can find it again. From high-tech to low-tech, paper. We're talking about the disposal of 2 vehicles from the municipal court. One is a 2007 Ford Expedition with the various serial numbers. And the second is a 1999 Ford Taurus with its serial numbers. And essentially, it just says, well, what do I need to do to get these started? So, Director Stone, what do we do to get rid of these things? Tell the audience.
The normal process, I wasn't aware of this particular request to dispose of these vehicles, but certainly it's not unlike anything else that we do when we go to dispose of capital items, and that once the VIN and vehicle number comes here before this body and this body approves of disposal for a titled piece of equipment, we can go ahead and dispose of it.
So it'll be the usual type of ordinance where we say we'll dispose of it either by donation, through auction, internet, and so on.
That's always my request. It's
Okay.
makes it easier to be able to dispose of them.
Well, I agree. Any member of council? Member Swank.
Just very quick, will we be replacing these vehicles with the enterprise vehicles? And have we gotten any enterprise vehicles yet, just out of curiosity?
We have gotten, I believe, 1 enterprise vehicle that was delivered. Beyond that, we anticipate several more probably coming here within the next couple of months. To answer your first question, whether or not we'll replace these, I don't know. Again, unfortunately, I was not aware of this particular request. It came outside, given that this is under a separate elected official.
Right.
It's not through the city administration. This request came directly to council, and I'm not tracking it. However, the city mechanics do maintain that portion of the fleet, so I'll look into the situation and get more details.
Thank you.
As far as I know, they're not being replaced. Of course, that's up to the municipal court. They can decide what they want.
Oh, missed that part.
Yeah. Anyone else have any comments on this? Okay, that concludes Transportation Committee. Okay. And we will move on to Finance and Personnel. There's several items there. Member Crowell, myself, Member Ziff, and Member Spionis at the dais. The rest of you depart. And I'll turn things over to the capable Member Crowell.
Thank you, Member Eisner. First item on our agenda tonight is staffing updates, and we have 2 specific things to talk about here at the committee. The first is discussions that the city administration is having with the Athens Fire Department about reorganizing the fire department. If I understand correctly, we currently have staffing at the fire department are firefighters, lieutenants, and then 3 captains, and then the chief. We have, of those 3 captains, 1 has rather quickly retired. Another one is planning to retire in April. And is the 3rd one the gentleman who may take on that sole position, Director Stone? Yeah. Okay, so the idea is to have a similar organizational structure as the Athens Police Department, which has 1 captain who's more of an administrative position, operational position. And this, I believe, this has to be worked with the union. There has to be an MOU, etc. But as these retirements are happening, and the city administration is looking at some of the opportunities that presents, they are considering this move to a 1 captain organization, which let's see here. I'll turn this over to Director Stone to talk about sort of the financial implications of this and maybe some of the other reasons for the recommendation. Director Stone?
Certainly, thank you, Member Crowell. There's a couple different reasons we think the time is right to make this change. And really, I'm trying to do this in a collective manner, working with members of the department, working with the union that represents both the lieutenants and the firefighters, so that, this is not an imposed thing, but it's a kind of a collective effort to really look at it and try to organize the department in the best manner looking forward into the future. One of the interesting challenges with the fire department and the current structure is that there are 3 captain positions which are in charge of the shifts. Those captain positions are non-union supervisory positions. They're unique in our non-union pay and benefits ordinance. If you read in the non-union pay and benefits ordinance, it's unique to that particular category of employee due to the way that they work. They work a 2496 schedule versus a 2080 schedule, which is the number of hours in a given year, and that has to do with that 24-hour shifts that they go and work and they govern. And so there's a significant amount of language in the non-union pay and benefits ordinance that talks about those captains. And one of the challenges that we have is there tends to be a decrease over time in the gap between a captain and a lieutenant ultimately in the fire department, insofar as what that causes is that we just don't have lieutenants that opt to be captains when they come open, because they say, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to give up a week of vacation? And why would I want to really not take a pay cut ultimately, or potential pay cut, by opting into that? So what ends up occurring is that junior firefighters are the ones ultimately that end up testing to become captains and the leaders of the department, when they're really not the most qualified, or at least not, I don't want to say qualified, but the most experienced personnel inside the organization. And so we think from a shift leadership perspective, a better structure would probably be to have lieutenants lead those shifts. And so what we're proposing is that, given that we've been presented this opportunity with one captain leaving very quickly, with about 36 hours notice as to when he would retire, and then another captain who's given a couple months of notice. Those 2 are departing at the same, relatively the same time. That we would go ahead and make that remaining captain into an administrative 40-hour position, not unlike what we have in the police department right now, and then have the shifts led by lieutenants and create a 3 more lieutenants ultimately, so that you have a lieutenant at each station in a given standard shift, and then you've got the firefighters that are underneath them, then that reside at each station as well. Ultimately, this will grow the department by 1 person. So if you can, think right now, there's three captains, there's 3 lieutenants. Ultimately, there would be 6 lieutenants and 1 captain, so that's 7 officers below the chief versus 6 that are below the chief right now, and then we keep the same number of firefighters. So it will have an expense, compared to today. We're working on the numbers right now to make sure that we know that completely. And like I said, I don't want this to be contentious. I want this to be an arrangement that everybody feels good about. The structure of the department. So I'm working with the members of the union, both representing the lieutenants and the firefighters, to ensure we have a situation. And it's not going to be a windfall to anybody, but I think that it could be a good structure for the department moving forward, particularly given that we're looking at building a new headquarters. And then as we think about the out years, if Athens grows and we ever got to the point where we would add a 3rd station somewhere in the community, I mean, that's, not completely unheard of if you had a situation where Athens grew by 10,000 people, and that could happen. As we look at the potential future of Ohio University, we look at the Intel plant coming in east of east of Columbus, and if we're fortunate, Athens really kind of balloons, and I don't say balloons, but grows here in the next couple decades. And so we think this structure would be able to accommodate that a little bit better if we got to that point, and we'd be setting the conditions for that in the future for not very much expense today. So, that's our thinking. Like I said, I still have some details to work through on all of this. Ultimately, what I see coming forward would be a change to the staffing ordinance as one piece of legislation. A change to the non-union pay and benefits ordinance would be a second piece of legislation, specifically moving that captain into that 40-hour a week employee. And then the third would be an MOU that would have financial implications that would accompany the current collective bargaining agreement we have with that particular union. So I see those kind of all happening concurrently. One thing that that could cause it to maybe not happen concurrently is if I can't work out those other two details to be at an acceptable level, that we seek to have the staffing ordinance modified beforehand to reduce the number of captains on the books. And the reason for that is because there is a provision in the Ohio Revised Code that says that within 60 days of a vacancy coming open in a public fire department, that you have to promote into that position. And so if we don't intend to do that, the only way that we could avoid breaking the law would be to actually remove that position from the book. So I don't want to do that. I want to bring everything together at once. But if I can't quite work that out, I would ask this body to consider reducing the number of captains by one until we could work it out, so that we can get to that step, to that level at the end. Hopefully that made sense.
Questions from the committee for Director Stone? Yes, Member Ziff.
Thank you, Member Kraft. Yeah, Director Stone, I had two. Well, I had two. One you already answered. I was just, I know that if a position does become vacant, we have to promote somebody into it, but it's a great idea. And then two, have any of the current firefighters, has this already been talked about with any of them, and has there been like general decent support? Or because I only ask just because I can envision a scenario of having a lieutenant in charge at Station 1, one at Station 2, and the potential of headbutting sometimes, in high stress situations without having someone like a captain who's the only one on shift with that. I guess there's whoever gets there first is in charge, but has it been a fairly positive response from them? Or?
So to answer your first question first, we have had discussions with the whole department. Ultimately, we've had a couple labor management meetings on this already. We've met with who ultimately will be the remaining captain and talked with him pretty extensively about it. It's our intent, myself and the chief, that is, that the senior lieutenant by seniority is the one that clearly is defined as in charge, even though there's the same rank, if you will, that senior lieutenant would be in charge, and it's understood. So, and I think everyone accepts that as a reasonable way to proceed.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Other members of council? Yes, Member Swank.
Mr. Stone, union membership, are captains and lieutenants members of the union?
Member Swank, currently captains are not members of the union, and lieutenants are members of the union.
Okay, and going from 3 to 6, we'd actually have a net increase in union membership then, would we not?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Which is similar to the structure in the police department.
Right.
Right now.
Other members of city? Oh, yes, Member Grace, please.
Just briefly, I appreciate the work that you've done on this, because it has been an ongoing issue for, as far as the challenge of finding individuals who want to be promoted to that captain position because of the differential not being enough. So I appreciate the work and the creativity to try to find a long-term solution.
Thank you, Member Grace. Other elected officials? Members of the public? Okay, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is another item under staffing. Our law director would like to change the title of one of the prosecutor positions. And that would be changing the title from prosecutor to assistant law director / part-time prosecutor. And you have the job description on the drive, and this has been approved and graded and placed in the pay band by our HR director. And this position would continue in the same pay band. It would be pay band 9, since it's not supervisory in nature. However, the law director would like to bring in this person higher than the 25% through the pay grade, which would be approved by a separate ordinance. And the law director has a specific person in mind who was previously in the office from 2016 to 2019 and had assisted the law director in numerous legal matters. And this candidate would start in mid-May. So the law director would like this to be considered and discussed, and the ordinances start next week. Just to remind everybody, the law director is a 30-hour per week or 3/4 time position, and she would like to have someone who can officially be her assistant to help her in civil matters. And if you read through the job descriptions, the job description advising this counsel would also be possible for when the law director is not available. Any questions about this proposal from the law director's offices from the committee? Yes, Member Reisner.
Any idea how much more than 25%?
The recommendation is to bring the person in at $36.06 per hour. Midway of this pay band is $36.77. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah.
And if you look at the end of the document there, you can see the current members of the law director's office.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions from the committee? From other members of council? Yes, Member Swank.
So this would not only be a title change, this would be additional personnel.
No. This is a title change.
Filling
That's
vacant
correct.
position.
Well, it's additional, if it's a vacant position, and we're hiring somebody, that's additional personnel. The person is the person currently employed by the city
I
of
believe
Athens?
it's an open position.
Okay, so additional personnel then.
Yeah,
Right.
but it's already budgeted. It's a
Yeah,
position.
yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
I just wanted to make sure what
Yeah.
we're talking about here.
Other council members, city administration, would you like to speak to this, Director Stone?
You know, the law director provides tremendous support to our operation, and she works very hard on civil matters, you know, that are outside of the prosecutorial duties of that office. So I generally support her request.
Okay, members of the public, any questions on this matter? Okay, moving on to the next item on our agenda. The Outdoor Recreation Council of Appalachia, ORCA. I believe this body, or some of us who were here a long time, and those of you who were paying close attention over the past few years, there was a request a number of years ago for a $9,000 annual membership fee to become a member of the Council of Governments of the Outdoor Recreation Council of Appalachia. And for a time, we discussed a 20-year commitment to that membership, and that was, we elected not to follow that route without the county also committing to the same payment schedule. Ultimately, the county did not commit to that, and so we are now considering this membership fee on an annual basis. I'll just note that ORCA has reached out to the county for a significant sum from their ARPA dollars, and I think the commissioners are discussing that, and I believe want more information on that. And I haven't heard, I don't know if the city administration has any input on whether they have considered the annual fee. Is that part of that request to use the ARPA funds, or are they considering the ORCA fee separately?
I can't speak to that, Member Crowell. I believe it's a separate request. I believe the ARPA funds is specific for capital improvement versus the membership fee for operating, but I can't speak to that.
Okay, that was my understanding too, so this will come up next week. A recommendation to once again be a member of the Council of Governments of the Outdoor Recreation Council of Appalachia at the cost of $90,000. Any questions from the committee?
Well,
Yes, Member Spellings.
Thank you, Member Crowell. Given that it's a lot of money, and I know we've discussed this and I've heard advantages before, but I think it would be helpful for those listening and for the audience to have a better understanding of what we get for that money. I think that's important. So if we could get a better handle on that, I think that would be helpful for the community to understand.
Thank you. Other comments? Other members? Yes, Member Swank.
I'd like to take that comment a step further, and I know we can't get this tonight because it's quite a bit of information, but what I would like to see are two things. How much money each of the other public entities contributed in 2020 and 2021. In other words, all of the other public entities, cities, villages, townships, whatever, that are part of ORCA. And secondly, I would love to see a document, and it does not need to be as comprehensive as Sunday Creek provided last week, which was unbelievable and detailed and comprehensive, but a document showing what progress has been made to date with, in addition to just building X number of trails. And then I guess the third thing is a question. This 90,000, this goes for operations, this is not for trail building?
I believe that is correct, but I don't know for sure.
So I guess part three would be clarification, what is the $90,000 for that we're being asked to spend, which I assume is out of what, tourism money, is that where it's coming from? Bed tax?
Yeah, the transient guest tax is likely where it would come from. Yes, Auditor Heck, can you join us?
Actually, our share of the transient guest tax goes into the general fund, so that's where this would be paid out of. And well, back in 19, we brought in about $225,000 in that. We pay $60,000 to the Economic Development Council for membership every year. So that if you go with 200,000, that leaves us down to 140,000, which would cover the 90,000. So technically, that's what we are using that money for, but it's actually going to come out of the general fund.
Other questions? Yes, Member Ziff, do you have a question?
Oh, no, I was just
Yeah, okay, yeah.
just gesticulating.
Director Stone?
I've taken down the two questions, or
Oh,
the
thank
three
you.
questions, and I'll get answers back to this body. It's as good a place as any to bring this particular issue up, because it doesn't fit anywhere else in the committee business tonight. But we talked about transit guest tax briefly, and I did want to give a brief report to council about the software that we currently subscribe to track short-term rentals. We got our first report on short-term rentals in the city of Athens right now. We have 16 advertised short-term rentals in the city of Athens, 4 of which are permitted. So based upon that, that first report, we subsequently will begin our enforcement actions based upon the legislation that was passed last year to go and wrangle up the additional 12 that currently are being advertised but are not permitted as rentals inside the city of Athens, and those are to pay transit guest tax. So,
And do you want to talk about the software piece?
There's a software program or basically a subscription to a web-based program that the code office, using their operating budget, has subscribed to that allows us to basically comb the various websites that are out there and cross-reference it with addresses and look at number of nights that are being booked. It's a pretty comprehensive way to look for this, and so. When you advertise online, you expect your information to be out there, and so subsequently, using this software, it allows us to target our enforcement operations.
And I'll just add that another piece of this, I believe, is that at least for the Airbnb system, Airbnb can charge through their system and automatically remit it to the city, I guess the TGT. Now, that's not the same as all short-term rentals. I think VRBO doesn't have that software. They don't offer that, but Airbnb does. So that may be a part of getting these additional properties permitted with the city. Other questions from the citizens of Athens? Any questions or comments? Okay, moving on to the next item on our agenda. Arts West, once again, Arts, Parks and Recreation, and Emily Beveridge has done a nice job with receiving grant monies, and there is a grant from the Klein Penny Educational Fund that will be used for the after-school arts supplies and music lending library. In the amount of $4,000. And so we thank the Klein Penny Fund, and we simply need to officially accept this grant for Arts West. Any questions about this Klein Penny grant? Administration?
And appropriated for use.
Sorry, what was that?
And appropriated for use.
And appropriated for use, thank you. Members of the public? Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next item on our agenda. Prior year bill. I could go into some detail, but I'd probably get it all confused. Auditor, would you like to speak to this? This is the workman's compensation third party, that it's actually a bill from 2019, I believe, but not at the fault of the city. It was the fault of the third party, and they are now getting it to us. But this will require suspension of the rules, or we recommend suspension of the rules because it is a bill that is long past due. Auditor?
Everything you said is correct. Back in 2019, we had some changes in the HR department. We received an invoice and it was paid, but the payment was applied to a different payment. And so for these years, which we're just kind of been able to figure out what's been going on, because the comp management company that handled our BWC issues was sold to Sedgwick, is who we deal with now, Sedgwick. And so anyway, we owe about $5,800 for that bill, which technically, if we had any serious event, could cause us a problem. Not likely that it will, but we owe that money. And so because it's over $3,000, it has to be approved by council for payment as a prior year bill to come out of this year's budget.
Thank you, Auditor. Any questions about this prior year bill? Again, yes, Member Ryan.
Well, if they've waited for the past 3 years, why the hurry to suspend the rules? Why not just give it its normal 3 readings and, stick with the procedure? I mean, is there a...
That wasn't my request, but,
Yes.
I think what we wouldn't want to do is risk the policy being turned off. And it would take more time probably to explain it, what had happened, than to just pay this and suspend the rules. And we can ask what the company...
It's a new company now, so we don't know exactly how they might respond to that, I guess. And, we owe that bill, and we've owed it for 3 years almost.
Well, what I understand from your explanation, we really did pay it, it's just that they credited it to the wrong place. Did I hear that right? Okay, so it's really their fault. I mean, you've done your due diligence, you did everything you're supposed to do, and now they're coming back and saying, well, we want our money, even though you gave it to us, we just put it somewhere else.
I'm pretty sure they applied it to another bill. They didn't just take the money and
Well,
not
no,
apply it.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
We owe the money. We owe the money. HR has all the paperwork that shows that, so we need to pay it. Whether you want us to spend, it's not up to me.
Thank you, Auditor. Thank you, Member Reisner, and we can discuss the suspension of the rules next week when it comes up.
Okay.
Other questions on this matter? Yes, Member Swank.
So this bill was for workmen's compensation premiums in the year 2019? No? What year?
The year is 2019. This is the company that manages our workers' comp program when somebody goes off on workers' comp and deals with that. Premiums are just paid straight out of our office. We owe what we owe to the workers' comp program. Does that make sense?
So do we pay X amount of money to this company to manage the program? This amount we owe, this $5,800, was for the management of the program in 2019? What year?
Yeah, it's a 2019 bill.
Okay.
Yes.
Did we pay for the premium for the management of the program in 2020?
I don't know. I assume we did.
21?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're current for 2022?
We haven't paid anything yet. But
Okay, so we're current on our bills. We owe a bill for services that we'll never have to take advantage of because people aren't going to file a workman compensation claim in 2022 for a period which we haven't paid the bill for yet. What I'm getting at is I concur with Mr. Reisner on this. I see no need to rush this. We can do our 3 readings and we'll send them the money.
I already said I don't care if you suspend or not. We owe the money. You know, that's, you know, we've owed it for quite a while. Like I said, there were some changes and issues in HR personnel, you might say, just from not having people. We've had people in and out of there for the last few years, and you know, that's just really all that was. But the fact is, we owe the money. We've owed it for a long time. That was me. I'd be paying it right away personally, but it's not up to me to say whether you suspend or not.
Thank you, Auditor. Yeah, well, we can talk about this next week. I'm not sure exactly, are we just trying to punish them for...
Yeah, they deserve it.
Make them wait?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you, Auditor. Other members of the public? Yeah, yes, Director Stone?
Just to clarify what this is for, this is the third-party administrator that manages claims, not unlike our third-party administrator that manages claims for the health insurance. The city being a health-insured, self-insured organization, you know, pools money into a fund, and then there's a third-party administrator that acts like an insurance company in approving and denying claims, routing folks to particular type of in-network versus out-of-network providers and such. This is the same program, but it's for the workers' comp pool of money, and as an employer, we're compelled to have someone function in that capacity, you know, managing those claims. And so that's what this is, just to clarify what it's for. I have no opinion on the, you know, paying it in suspension or not. That's.
Thank you for that additional information. Other comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next item, appropriations. We have 3 appropriations on tonight's agenda. The first is for work at the Oakmont Lift Station. So this would be an appropriation to the wastewater treatment plant in the amount of $35,000. I believe the Oakmont Lift Station needed more work than was anticipated. I think approximately $11,000 had been spent, and it's been determined that an additional $35,000 would be needed for those repairs. Any questions? Yes, Member Reisner.
Yeah, I live up in Oakmont. I didn't realize there was a problem up there. What happened, or what's needed?
You don't walk down to the lift station very often?
Well, not in the past year or so.
It's sinking.
Oh,
So
it's
that lift
sinking.
station was built in 2004.
Yeah, I remember.
And it's gradually been sinking, and there's been some separation of concrete.
Oh.
And so there's not a situation where we're, polluting the creek or anything along those lines, but the building is having some structural problems. And we placed some money in the budget, hoping that it would be some minor repairs, and we've determined it's a little bit more substantial. So it will not exceed $50,000, so we don't need to bid this, but it's a more substantial repair.
Thanks for the information. Thanks.
Other members of council or committee? Other members of council? Other members of administration, public? Any comments? Okay, next appropriation is $4,000 to the Recreation Fund for the Arts West grant, as previously discussed from the Klein Penny Educational Fund. Any questions or comments on this appropriation? Anyone? Anyone? Thank you. And the last item is $100,000 to the general fund auditor, and this is for income tax refunds. Auditor, would like to speak to this at all?
Sure. We knew this was coming as far as the refunds, and the changes in the law because of COVID. So in the past, for several years, we have appropriated $250,000 for refunds. And that covered it, sometimes pretty close, but for, I don't know, I want to say maybe 10 years. This year, we did ask for $350,000 in our refund line, which, because we knew there would be more, but it looks like there's even more than we realized. And so right now, we have actually processed, or as of late last week, $212,000 out of that $350,000. We have $138,000 left for refunds, and we have estimated about $77,000 to $80,000 sitting on our tax administrator's desk right now. So that brings us down to about $50,000 or $60,000 left. We haven't even hit our first tax deadline of April 15th. The last time we hit this amount of $212,000, and I went back to 2019 because 2020 and 21 weren't normal years as far as tax collection. We didn't hit that amount until November, after the October extensions were filed and processed. So if that gives you any kind of understanding of where we are. So we're asking for another $100,000 right now.
Comments or questions from the committee?
Ouch.
Ouch. Yeah.
Ouch. Members of council, Member Swank?
Do we have any idea of that 212, how much of that is the law that they passed in Columbus for commuters? Or not commuters, remote workers, I guess.
Yes, about 95,000 of it.
Okay. Wow.
So, I was told, oh, people aren't going to bother, blah, blah, blah.
$95,000.
Yeah, right.
I knew better, and actually, once it got out, it's been on Facebook, and people are telling their friends, nothing wrong with that. They're due that money, but the idea that people wouldn't bother, even for $100, I would, so. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions? Members of the public? Okay, finally tonight I'd like to congratulate Director Stone's global family and your son's national award. And the picture in the local newspaper was fabulous. The global Christmas card there. I believe you were overseas at that time, right? And the family was here. Anyway, congratulations, DJ. And that ends Finance and Personnel.
Okay, well, that concludes our committee session for tonight. So, do I have a motion to end the meeting?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. I don't think anybody's against.